Hello, you amazing human beings, you. All right, mysticism. Maybe kind of a scary word for some of you, not sure what to think about that. It's actually a tradition within Christianity that can have, or refer to many different things. It can refer to the most ecstatic visions of God or literally hearing God's voice, or it can refer to simple, quiet, peaceful contemplation, a wide range of experiences. But what mysticism is concerned with primarily is the unmediated experience of communion or union with God. And you've probably heard of some famous Christian mystics like George Fox, for example, or Saint Francis, or Teresa of Avila, or the person that we're going to talk about today, Hildegard von Bingen. Von is just the German word for of or from. So Hildegard of Bingen. We'll talk about her for a second. She was born in 1098, and at the age of 5, she started having visions of God. Then basically at the age of 8, her parents dropped her off at a convent. And she spent the next 40 years growing up in that convent, living with the nuns there, a nun herself. And she really didn't have any contact with the outside world except for letters for the next 40 years. Then in the 1140s, the archbishop approved for her to start her own convent, which she did. And that's where she became a Benedictine abbess, which is like the head of the nuns. And she was a poet, a musician, a healer, basically a doctor. She worked with a lot of natural herbal remedies to help understand and try and heal diseases. So in her lifetime, she wrote a lot of books. She wrote about living light theology, as she called it, her understanding of what she thought God was telling her to write about. She would discuss theology in terms of the natural world. She also wrote books about medicine and healing and how to use these herbs. And she's the composer of at least 77 monophonic chants that survive to this day. And I say the word monophonic chant because you know this texture, monophony. This is just a single line of melody that's being sung. So we're going to look at a specific one of those today. The reason we've chosen Hildegard of Bingen is because our Beatitude is "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." And in the context of this monastic lifestyle, as a nun, as an abbess, she sort of epitomizes a life dedicated to purity before God, to focus on God alone, and to service of other people. And so that actually for her literally meant seeing visions of God. So the piece of hers that you can listen to is Ave Generosa. And what I'd like you to do now, this time around, is actually pause this video of me explaining it to you and go listen to it first and take some notes on the musical elements that we've been learning about. Thrimphs. Take some notes. I think you'll surprise yourself by what you're able to come up with and notice. Okay, so we'll see you back here in a minute after you've listened to Hildegard von Bingen's Ave Generosa. Okay, welcome back. Did you notice some interesting things? There are some characteristics of this style of music that are very different probably from some of the other music that you might normally listen to. So let's identify those, because I'm sure you heard them, and we're just going to practice naming them. So the timbre, first of all, there's only one timbre. There's the human voice, in this case the female voice. And we get slight color changes between when it's one person singing and when it's the group of people singing in unison. So you can pay attention to that. How did it sound different when one person was singing versus when the whole group was singing? But really, the timbre is pretty straightforward. In this time period, they would have been interested in a vocal quality that was more pure and dead on, not a lot of like scoops or bends like we might experience in a lot of music that we listen to today. Okay, next, the harmony. There really isn't any. There really isn't harmony because we only have one melody line and there's no background instrument or other voices. They're not singing in parts, like maybe you've heard or sung yourself in parts. The melody might imply harmony at times, but there really isn't a harmonic aspect to this music. And next, how about rhythm? Okay, the rhythm is interesting here too, because if you're like me, your favorite kinds of music are music with a great groove, with a pulse, with a beat. And this music doesn't have that. There actually, in this time period, wasn't a consistent way to even notate the rhythm so that someone else would know what rhythm you intended when you composed. So the rhythmic aspect is very different. It's very free-flowing, but it's cool because it gives it this sense of meditation, maybe a peacefulness, maybe a freedom for the performer to sing it at the speed they want. And if you think about that, that's a lot like talking. In one moment, you might talk a little more quickly. In another, you might talk a little more slowly. The musician gets to decide that in the moment because there isn't a preset rhythm that they have to follow. The melody is pretty singable. It's not a huge wide range, but it's also what we call through composed. That means, again, unlike music that you or I might listen to on a more regular basis, there aren't verses and choruses and a part that we recognize that they come back to. There's a certain interval that happens at the beginning of some of the lines, a perfect fifth, this leaping up, and that repeats several times in the piece, especially at the starts of lines of a new line of text, but there isn't a whole section that repeats itself. So that's something about the melody, but it's also something about the form. Remember, these elements never exist in isolation. We can pick them apart and talk about each one, but they're always working together. So again, the form is driven by the text, and there isn't a specific verse, chorus, bridge, whatever kind of repetition to it at all. It's a free-flowing melody that's through composed. And then finally, the texture, we've mentioned already, it's monophonic, one single line. And here's a good point of clarification. Even when the other voices join in and everyone is singing, it's still a monophonic texture because together they're singing a single melody. They're not singing in harmony. So we still call that a monophonic texture, even when lots of people are singing, because they're singing one mono melody at a time. So you notice that there's some differences here between Hildegard's music and the music we listen to a lot today. Think about how easy it is to hear and understand the text of her music. There's not a lot to get in the way musically of actually understanding the words. And so that's a specific musical aesthetic that helps make the words stand out and makes them very important. So the music is serving the text and the message of the music. I want to end today with some questions or queries about this Beatitude that we have for the day. And the Message paraphrase says the Beatitude this way: you're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and your heart put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. Hildegard of Bingen is obviously an example of literally seeing God and experiencing God in a unique way that we may or may not all experience. But we all are meant to experience God. So here are those queries. How do you focus on getting your mind and your heart right? What obstacles keep you from being pure in heart? And what blessings have you noticed when your mind and your heart are right? Okay, I hope you enjoyed listening to something that maybe you've never listened to before in your life. And if you go into those musical elements and listen deeply, you might find something to appreciate, even music that's like 800 years old. All right, take care. See you again.